Hello everyone. In today's class, let's talk about the summary of Sandra Gilbert and Social Gubar's The Madwoman in the Attice. Chapter 1, The Queen's Looking Glass, Female Creativity, Male Images of Women. This work is a classic feminist literary critique that explores the portrayal of women in literature and the constraints placed on female creativity by a male-dominated literary tradition. Let's read the background of what is the Madwoman in the Attice. Sandra Gilbert and Social Gubar's The Madwoman in the Attice 1979 is a foundational feminist text that examines how women writers in the 19th century navigated the patriarchal literary tradition. Chapter 1, The Queen's Looking Glass, sets up the central argument women's creativity has been shifted or stifled by male-dominated cultural norms and the stereotypical representations of women in literature. The title of the chapter refers to the Queen's Looking Glass, inspired by the mirror in the fairy tale Snow White. Gilbert and Gubar use this mirror as a metaphor for how patriarchal culture reflects distorted images of women, imposing strict and damaging roles on them. Let's find out the key themes in Chapter 1. First, we find the patriarchal representations of women. Gilbert and Gubar argue that male writers have historically portrayed women in stereotypical and reductive ways. These portrayals can be boiled down to opposing roles. One, the angel, idealized women, that women who are pure, selfless, submissive, and nurturing, that embody domestic virtue and are often portrayed as perfect wives, mothers, or muses. Second, the monster, threatening women. Women who reject their traditional roles are depicted as mad, dangerous, or evil. They represent rebellion and defiance against patriarchal norms. Second theme. Example in literature. Snow White serves as an allegory for these rules. Snow White is an angel, submissive, beautiful, and good. On the other hand, the evil queen is the monster, ambitious, vain, and wicked. Through these depictions, patriarchal writers reinforce the idea that women who conform to traditional expectations are virtuous, while those who defy them are monstrous. Let's go to the second theme in the chapter 1. The looking glass metaphor. The looking glass, a mirror, symbolizes how women's identities and creativity are shaped and distorted by male-dominated culture. Patriarchal society reflects what women are supposed to be, confining them to rigid roles and denying them agency. Women are forced to see themselves through the eyes of man, leading to an internalized struggle where they attempt to live up to impossible ideals or reject these roles and face ostracism. The third theme we find that says the struggles of female writers. Gilbert and Gubar explore how 19th century female writers, for example Charlotte Bronte, Emily Dickinson, Mary Shelley, faced unique challenges as they tried to create art in a male-dominated literary tradition. Women writers were pressured to either conform to patriarchal expectations, producing works that aligned with traditional notions of femininity, for example, sentimental novels about love and domesticity. Rebel against these expectations, often at the cost of being labeled mad, monstrous, or unfeminine. The anxiety of authorship. Gilbert and Gubar build on Harold Bloom's concept of the anxiety of influence, the fear that male writers experience about being overshadowed by earlier male writers. For women writers, the problem is different. Women face the anxiety of authorship. a fear that they cannot create original works because they have been taught that women are incapable of genius or creative power. This anxiety is compounded by the fact that male literary tradition offers them only two options: to be the angel or to be the monster. Let's go to the theme number 4 from the chapter 1. Female creativity versus male authority. Women writers had to contend with a literary world where men controlled the publishing industry, defined literary standards, and shaped cultural norms. Male writers often depicted women as muses or objects of inspiration rather than as creators in their own right. Gilbert and Gubar argued that women writers in the 19th century were forced to work within and against these constraints, often channeling their frustration and rebellion into their writing. Number 5. The Madwoman as a symbol of rebellion. The Madwoman in the Attays is a recurring figure in 19th century literature, epitomized by Bertha Mason in Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre. Bertha is the mad wife locked away in the Attays by Mr. Rochester, and she represents the anger, rebellion, and suppressed creativity of women under patriarchal oppression. Gilbert and Gubar see the Madwoman as a metaphor for how women in literature and in society are silenced, marginalized, and punished when they step outside traditional roles. Female authors often include such mad characters as symbolic expressions of their own frustration and rebellion. At the same time, these characters reveal the struggle for female autonomy in a world that labels independence as insanity. Number 6. The theme from the chapter 1. The subversive power of women's writing. Despite the constraints imposed by patriarchal culture, Gilbert and Gubar argue that many 19th century women writers found ways to critique and subvert these norms through their work. For example, Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre critiques the angel ideal by giving Jane an independent voice and exploring her inner life. Mary Shelley's Frankenstein can be read as a critique of male-dominated science and creativity. These women were able to use their writing to challenge male-dominated portrayals of women and assert their own voices, even when their works were dismissed or misunderstood. So what key literary examples in this chapter we find? First, we find Snow White. The story illustrates the divide between the angel, Snow White, and the monster, the evil queen. These roles reflect how women are forced into binary representations. They are either submissive and good or ambitious and bad. Second literary example, you can find Jane Eyre itself, the Charlotte Bronte. The Bertha Mason, the Madwoman in the Attays, symbolizes the rebellious, suppressed aspect of female identity. She stands in contrast to Jane, who struggles to assert her independence while navigating societal expectations. Number 3. Paradise Lost. Gilbert and Gubar critique Milton's portrayal of Eve as a figure who embodies both submission to Adam and danger through her disobedience. She is another example of the patriarchal construction of women as either virtuous or corrupt. Now let's come to the conclusion part, that the Queen's Looking Glass. Gilbert and Gubar argue that women writers must navigate a literary world shaped by male-defined images of women. This creates a conflict between conforming to societal expectations, becoming the angel, and rebelling against them, rising, being seen as the monster. However, women writers have historically used their work to critique these binary roles, offering complex, multidimensional depictions of female identity and experience. The essay sets the stage for the rest of the Madwoman in the Ties by exploring how 19th century women writers responded to those challenges and carved out space for their creativity in a patriarchal world. So let's find out the summary of the key points we have discussed so far in short. First, male images of women that we discussed, which talks about the women in literature are often reduced to the angel, idealized or submissive, or the monster, rebellious, dangerous. Second, we find the looking glass. Patriarchal culture distorts women's identities, forcing them to see themselves as men define them. Number 3, anxiety of authorship. Women writers face unique struggles, including the belief that creativity is a male domain. Number 4, the Madwoman. Figures like Bertha Mason represent the anger and rebellion of women suppressed by social norms. And number 5, that we find as a key point, subversion. Despite the constraints, 19th century women writers used their work to challenge male-dominated ideas about women. That's all, guys, and thank you so much for listening to my summary.